I'm just gonna go ahead and dive in. Good evening, everybody. It's been a great time listening to Brandy and Chai and Cameron and Brandon with your presentations. They're all going to directly relate to what I'm about to talk about. So that was a good presentations by you all, and I hope to continue with this great information. So good evening to everyone there. I'm looking at the attendees, a lot of names I recognize, some I don't. So I'd just like to introduce myself, and let me get my screen so I can show you my presentation here. Let's see here. All right, so my name is Marisa Fricke, and I work here at the Rio Grande Water Conservation District. And I say I work here, but lately I feel like I've been living here. It's been some crazy few months with a lot of rules in place and plans that we need to get set out for the future here. And so it's been a crazy few months. So I'm sure all you can relate to that. But just wanted to introduce myself, and I'm going to be talking about the sub-districts here in the Valley, how it's tied to prevent plant, and even to some of the points Brandy discussed earlier about her master's irrigator program. So for those that are not from the Valley, or maybe just new to the whole sub-district concept, we here in the Valley are basically irrigators that are in some form of a sub-district. So what is a sub-district? In its simplest form, it's an augmentation plan. So if you have an irrigation well and you need to operate that well, the sub-district is your water replacement source, so that we are not causing injury to senior surface water owners, and we're not causing injury to the river, and we're meeting the compact needs. So when you look at this map, you see 6 sub-districts. There is a 7th one, Trinchera, out there that isn't directly under our district, but we work with them, and we have a lot of relationships with Trinchera. But technically, the 6 sub-districts under the Rio Grande Water Conservation District, sprinkled throughout the Valley. But as you can see, the Valley is basically under a sub-district. So we're here to help the farmers, the irrigators, be able to turn on their well here in a couple weeks. April 1st, we will be the replacement sources to the river and show proof to the state engineer that we are not causing injury, and we can meet some sustainability goals that are set in our decrees. So that's a little bit about the sub-districts. We'll move on. And this is just a cool image I always like showing. It just shows all the center pivots, and kind of the big concentration there is, of course, Subdistrict No.1 north of the river there. But throughout the Valley, you see that we have a lot of irrigators here. Agriculture is our main source. It's our biggest fuel to the economy, and we want to keep that going, and we understand the importance of it, but we're also working against lower aquifer levels and less snowpack and monsoons that we haven't really been seeing in the last couple of years. So how do all of us work through this agriculture community with less of a resource? So here's the map. I'm sure many of you have seen. Whenever I present, I always show this. It's just very, eye appealing, if you will, on what all happens in particular to Subdistrict No.1. So we in Subdistrict No.1 have to report our acres to the state. And so by our decree, we have to go out, we ask all the farmers to report what they're planning, and we submit it up to Denver. So that's why Subdistrict No.1 has this map that we're able to provide to the public on all these wonderful presentations that we get invited to. So I hope you can all see the key there down at the bottom of what are the different crops. If you can't, I will just kind of highlight the 3 biggest crops we have in Subdistrict No.1. Last year, we had 46,428 acres in potatoes, 32,174 in barley, and alfalfa, 27,160. So alfalfa is that lime green corner you see on the west side there of the sub-district. Barley is going to be, I believe it's the yellow, yeah, the yellow there, mostly in the center of the subdistrict. And then alfalfa, potatoes are the brown. So we at least try to keep the color close to what the crop is. And then when you look at the map and you wonder, well, what's those red circles, what crop is that? It's actually our CREP program. So as you heard Brandon and Chai and others mention, our CREP program is particular to Subdistrict No.1 right now. It's our conservation program that we have with the federal government. They help us pay and incentivize reduced farming practices, reduced water use for 15 years. So with the red, you see a big clump over there in that alfalfa area on the west side is in CREP, and then sprinkled throughout the subdistrict, and then another concentrated cell there down on the south side. So a lot of CREP throughout the subdistrict. This year we're hitting 10,000 acres. So that's kind of a big monumental number that we've been trying to reach for a while. And we're happy that we're there and we're continuing to see that enrollment happen. So let's see here. My next map I will show you is going to just focus on the conservation efforts. So Subdistrict No.1 is a decree that is set up to have a sustainability goal met purely through voluntary reduction. So I heard Brandy say this as well. In her basin, it's voluntary. We have no regulatory authority to tell people to cut back, to enforce any sort of restrictions on anything. It's completely based on voluntary enrollment. So to kind of feed off of the last presentation, the prevent plant is what you see in purple. So you can see that is pretty significant in Subdistrict No.1. And I believe, Brandon, Kai, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Subdistrict No.1 has the most acres of prevent plant in the valley. So, which is understandable since, you know, the size. But purple is showing prevent plant, which is huge to our farmers. We're very happy and grateful for that program. So we hope to see that continue. And then our fallow is in our turquoise. Again, CREP is in red. And then last year, the Board of Managers saw the need to get some emergency programs out before the irrigation started. We always have at least one program every year that we deploy out there to grab anyone that would like to get incentivized to cut back on their water use. And so every year we have at least one. Last year we planned on a half usage program. That's what you see in orange. And that was based off of your 5-year average, what you pump on from your well, your 5-year average cut in half. That is what you had to hit. That was your goal you had to hit. And we saw great enrollment there. But as I was saying earlier, the Board of Managers said, we need to do more. The snowpack isn't really there. We're average at best. Let's kick off more programs that we're calling emergency drought. So we did an emergency program that said, stop irrigating, don't replant, especially those that had barley and hail damage, don't replant. We will pay you to not put anything else on there, to not water. And then we also did an alfalfa deficit program where we asked the irrigator to not irrigate for their second cutting. So good enrollment in all those. We, as anything done the first time it's trial and error. So we were happy for everyone that participated and gave us feedback. And it definitely helped our situation since 2020 wasn't too kind on our aquifer again. So this map is strictly all the voluntary reduction that happens in Sub 1. You see a lot of those half fields planted out there on the east, which is depicted just by the image. It's not so much a program, but you see a lot of half circles that farmers do just completely on their own without being incentivized. But you could see that here through the map as well. So last year, with all of our emergency prep programs, our brand new half usage, our CREP, our fallow, we had the highest enrollment in all of our programs in the history of the subdistrict. So that's a big deal to us because more and more people are getting on board with understanding that our aquifers are going down. What can we do to help? The sub-district is still a mechanism to provide some dollars to these farmers to cut back for as long as the sub-district can and will do that. It's great that they're taking advantage of basically funds that came from our irrigators are circling back to our irrigators. So it's all kind of a cycle of dollars. We're collecting from them, but then we're turning around and giving it back. So it's money that's staying here in the valley. So with all those programs in place, it is approximately 6,000 acre feet we saved. So this picture here was one that I took on my camera when I went out to do an alfalfa check to make sure the meters were reading and that the meter wasn't running for this individual that was in our alfalfa deficit program. So as you can see, the alfalfa is still doing good and healthy, and we all know how hardy alfalfa can be. So I just love that picture. It reminds me of a lot of things that happened this summer, but mostly these new folks that haven't participated in programs that were willing to try this out and see, can they not irrigate and have success, and they did. So that was an exciting time to see that new program kick off. So why do we do all these programs? Why does Sub 1 have to pay people to cut back? Well, first off, in the beginning of the sub-district, across the board, I should say, across the board, a lot of end guns were removed, voluntary, no compensation for that. Everyone understood to get the sub-district going, we need to cut back as much as we can. So end guns were removed and people switched crops. They're going to canola, they're going to less water consumptive crops. So a lot of things happen just naturally and voluntary. And here's the chart showing our pumping. So historically, our pumping was high in the 300,000 acre feet. And then in 2011, that's when the sub-district was in place and we started charging and monitoring and informing people of the situation we're in and how we want to control our destiny. We don't want the state to come in and shut us all down. Kevin Ryan, the state engineer, he has to make sure decrees are met. And Subdistrict No.1 is under a decree that says we will recover the aquifer by a certain year at a certain level, and then always make sure we meet the compact and meet the river depletions. So the compact and the river depletions, we can achieve that. We've been achieving it, and our canals that we have in Subdistrict 1 help us sometimes deliver more water into our subdistrict than we pumped out. So we are good as far as the river is concerned, but our biggest Achilles heel, if you will, is the aquifer. It's underground, it's hard to monitor, it's not like the river where you can see the flow, you can measure it easily. Aquifers are a whole different beast and a little bit more of a challenge, especially when you have a million acre foot hole to fill up. So here's our pumping records. We're tracking it closely. So much data is collected in this office and analyzed daily, hourly, and so we're doing the best we can with data that we have. We have about 10 years worth of data. So how do we use that and propel into the future with this known data and to tweak what mistakes maybe were made or just how to make differences? So you can see here the last year, 2020, we pumped 236,000 acre feet. That is lower than what we did in 2018, which, as we all know, 2018 was a really bad year. So we're glad to see that the pumping is low, even in a not so great year, but it's still not getting us where we need to be. And let me explain that a little bit further. So here's just a historical graph of pumping, aquifer loss, and what water was brought into the subdistrict. So the gray bar is the pumping, acre feet pumped. The red bar in some years is what the aquifer lost, and then the final blue column is what we brought into the subdistrict. So a lot of conversations I have with people is, what happened? Why is Subdistrict No.1 in such a critical situation? And I pull up this graph a lot because I want to show that for 4 years, there was aquifer recovery, Pumping was pretty consistent. As you can see, we're in those 230,000 acre feet range, but we had 4 years of aquifer recovery. The time frame that we have to meet our goal, we still were kind of in the beginning phases, and things were good. Then you look at 2018, and the bottom just dropped out. The drought, no snow, heat, dry soils, it just changed our course dramatically, and we're continuing to struggle to bounce back from that. And that's just kind of a mystery of these aquifers, is they react so quickly to drought and high pumping. But you get a year like 2019 where snowpack was excellent. It was a great water year. And even though you see 2019, there's a gain, we didn't make up what we lost in 2018. So with such a great year, after such a bad year, we still didn't make up what we needed to. So we're starting to study that a little bit more. The aquifer can react quickly to drought, but a little bit slower to those good water years. So of course we know soils and a lot of things play into that, but definitely something we're studying a little bit harder. And then 2020, again, unfortunately, it was basically a net loss. What we gained in 2019, we lost last year. So we're sitting basically at the same level as we were in 2018. So it's a juggling act. So many pieces go into this, but that's just a kind of a ground level knowledge of Subdistrict 1 and pumping and where we're at and why. So I believe Brandon kind of mentioned how insurance, they look at snowpack and the triggers. What is a trigger to possibly have prevent plant? And it sounded like an aquifer levels definitely played into that for us. And so when we look at aquifer levels going into the irrigation season, since we don't know what pumping will be, this is obviously one graph that many of you will look at as well. And right now, 2021 is tracking along that average line. So 2021, if you could follow my graphics, there is that black line, and the average line there is that lime color, I guess you could say. And so we're doing good, but we're definitely not 2019. So we have to tread cautiously here in the future and see what we can do to make sure we don't have another 2020 aquifer loss. So that we are watching amongst a lot of other pieces. And so District 1 is up against a timeline. So with all these other sub-districts, when you saw the map, what I should have explained at the beginning of the presentation is Subdistrict 1 is 10 years into their plan, where all these other sub-districts are just starting. A couple of the sub-districts are a couple years into the game, and they're working on their water sources, and they have their challenges. We definitely have our challenges, but we also have kind of time is not our friend right now. So Subdistrict No. 1's decree says we have to recover the aquifer by 2030. And we have a ways to go. And so the Board of Managers and the community as a whole has to figure this out. We understand the climate isn't what it is. The aquifer is recognizing drought very quickly, but slower to bounce back on wet years. So how can we keep the agriculture community alive? As Brandy mentioned as well, there's no regulatory authority, but there's economics. That word always comes up. And what Subdistrict No. 1's biggest goal is to not have the entire subdistrict shut off, because that's happened in another place of the state, and actually recently happened in the Valley to Subdistrict No. 5. I'm sure you've heard this by now, but Subdistrict No. 5, their report that all the subdistricts have to do is we send it to the state, and they look at, does our water supplies fulfill the needs? Is our sustainability being met? And if everything seems to be moving along towards the goals, we get to turn on our wells on April 1st. So every year, this time in March, we put together a report to the state engineer and say, this is our pumping, these are our programs, this is what we're trying to do, and we wait for that response back. And And luckily, in all these past years, he's approved our annual replacement plan. But as time goes on and aquifer levels stay low and pumping levels stay high, that approval is becoming less and less of an insurance. It's more of we are hoping that everything we're doing can buy us some more time to figure out what we can do differently, or what can we change to be sustainable. So here's the timeline for Subdistrict No.1. You can see we're halfway through what we are decreed for, but as Kevin Ryan mentioned, in 2018, we are not guaranteed the full 10 years. If at any point our sustainability level is so far out of reach, he could say your annual replacement plan that lists all these thousands of wells in Subdistrict No.1 is declined. And just like in Subdistrict 5, you cannot turn on your well. And that would be extremely devastating to the valley, to everyone. And so that's the biggest economic challenge we're trying to avoid. And the main mechanism we can do is education, information, and get programs out there that are at the right price point that will make people join our conservation programs. So as far as new programs for 2021, we have a new program called the Well Purchase Program. So even though the deadline has passed, the deadline was last Monday, we are asking producers who are in a position to sell their well to the subdistrict. You name the price, and based on consumptive use and a lot of different pieces, we will be retiring these wells permanently. So on that report that I get to send to Kevin Ryan here in a couple weeks, we get a list that to say this is one more tool in our toolbox that we're trying to do to keep the subdistrict going and keep approving our ARP, please. So it's definitely a risk that the subdistrict takes every year, is what programs can we offer at what dollar amount. It comes from feedback from all of you. So whenever you have an idea, whenever you call us up, whenever you talk to a board member, all those conversation pieces come together when we think of our new programs. So that has been a huge success so far. We got a great turnout of people wanting to sell their wells. They understand the importance. They're in a position to do that, and they know that the subdistrict and the district will retire that water rights and keep that water in the valley. So that was a good key piece to this program, is that water that water right that we permanently retire will stay in this valley. So, and then of course we always have some of our returning programs. So we have fallow, which is more of our temporary. That could be based on 1 year, 2 year, or 4 years. Just how many quarters you put in depends on what category of years you sit that filled out. And then CREP, which is our big federal partner that we're so thankful for as well. So here's our recovery line. This is what we put out as much as we can whenever we can. This is Subdistrict No.1 goal that we have to reach in that 10 years that you saw previously. That negative 400,000 acre-foot line is what we have to reach in 10 years. And in order to do that, we calculated with the help of our engineers, that takes 93,000 acre-feet of less pumping every year to reach that. So it's a Mount Everest, but what we need to keep in mind and what we need to stay positive thinking is as long as we can show consistent gains, that will hopefully buy us some time and get us to have some time to reconfigure Subdistrict 1 and the terms that we had in place since the beginning. So as you can see there, the graph goes down, that's 2018, it goes up in 2019, and then just straight back down. And I'm actually gonna try to zoom in. Hopefully it's zooming in on your end too, but this is what I mean when I say, here's 2018, we're sitting here on this negative, let's see here, negative 1,200,000 line. Then 2019, we have huge gains, but 2020, we just drop right down. So it's a challenge for sure, but I know the farmers and everyone here in the valley are so tightly connected because of our water that we understand it's better to make some cuts and changes and keep this going than to see you know, wells shut off. We definitely want to avoid that. And of course, I have to do this plug. Let me just make sure here. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was on my last slide. But so just with the valley and the sub-districts and what we do here and our great community, our water is our most important resource. And even though some may have more water than others and some may live in the one side of the community versus the other, we're all valley members, and our water needs to stay here for our ag community, for our businesses, our co-ops, our insurances, our electrical companies. So many people depend on our ag community, and our water is the lifeline. So we have a website called Protect Our Water that is kind of a second mission that we're doing here with a lot of local partners to make sure people are informed that we do not have enough water for our own valley, much less any excess amount that could be used elsewhere. So I think that's all I